Castology.
Welcome to Castology, the podcast where we listen to podcasts, adore podcasts, and also give advice about podcasting and podcasts themselves.
So many times you said the word podcast.
Well, guess
It's
what?
a drinking game, guys. Every time we say the word podcast, get on it.
You are 30 seconds in and officially wasted. I'm one of your hosts, Nick Bleeker. Across from me is
Zane C. Weber.
And to my left.
Liz Best.
How you feeling, Liz?
Look, I'm getting better. As you can see, here, I still sound a little bit croaky, and I still need to cough my guts up every single time the mic is off. However, it's not COVID, so it's just that I have terrible lungs.
Yep.
And then I wake up in the morning because I haven't breathed properly overnight, and I cough all over again. It's really hard to breathe, you guys.
Yeah, well, this is the perfect show to breathe and talk on. But I'm gonna get you to relax your voice just for now, Liz, and I'm gonna get on to our recommendations, our reviews for this week. Zane, let's start with yours.
Okay, I'm recommending Timesuck with Dan Cummins.
Okay.
Lots of words.
I want to apologize in advance to Liz specifically.
Oh shit! Why?
Okay.
Because it's a long show.
Oh shit!
So pick. It's interesting though. Lots of interesting topics.
Why are you
lots of
apologising
episodes.
to Liz for this?
Because he knows that my attention span is that of a gnat most times, and I really don't enjoy having to listen to very long podcasts.
Okay.
And on top of it being long,
Jesus,
it does tend towards bro-ishness.
Oh.
It is a solo host, so it's not locker room talky.
Okay.
But it is kind of one guy sometimes attempting to make jokes about things to keep things going on. So this is not Zane Dry.
Okay, it better not be.
And honestly, this is my attempt to get an educational podcast that isn't Zane Dry
all right.
onto
Benefit
the
of the doubt.
podcast.
I'll allow it.
So it's one coast, Dan Cummins, and it's weekly 2 to 2.5 hour episodes. I will forgive you if you don't make it through whole episodes because that's a long push.
Do you know what? Like, though, I don't feel, and I feel the same way about theatre. I don't feel I am able to review something unless I have listened to at least one part of, like people who leave theatre at interval and still review can go straight to hell.
Yeah.
So I will commit to listening to a full episode because that is my job, but I will resent you for it if I hate it.
That's fine.
Do
I
you
expect
have
that. Yes.
Episode recommendations?
Look, yes. I particularly liked the history and morality of sex work episode.
Oh, I'm in.
That was early this year. And he did one on Celtic mythology as well, which was also kind of the stuff that you didn't really know about, the Celtic mythology. So that was also very good. I think that was also early this year. Now, this true crime one, he did an episode on the Menendez brothers.
Ooh, I do know a lot about the Menendez brothers.
That was last year. And that was, again, I didn't know a lot about it, but sociopaths are interesting inherently.
Yeah.
That was interesting as well.
Sex work in the Menendez brothers, right.
So the Menendez brothers, I'm just looking right now. The Menendez brothers episode is 2 hours and 47 minutes.
Look, I feel like I've listened to, like, collectively, if I count an entire series that I've listened to on them, probably.
Fair.
Yeah. This is the thing. I'm like, I have a short attention span, but also I'm going to binge 8 hours of this TV show. I don't, because it's in small 20-minute intervals.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, those sorts of things, they give you license to break away if you need it.
Yeah.
And whereas this is like, okay, if I'm committing, I'm committing.
Yeah.
But like some of the other episodes are like Appalachian cryptids, just going through all the different cryptids of Appalachia. And so again, the Oregon Trail, the Dolphin Point experiments where they, fed LSD to a dolphin to try to get it to talk.
Wait, what?
There you go.
Listen to that episode.
The Dolphin Point experiment.
A
dolphin fell in love with a lady.
What?
And they lived in a house full of water.
And dolphins are fucking horny too.
Yeah, I mean, people are horny.
Yeah, I know.
Well, you can't hold it against dolphins.
But no. It's mostly because, like, in the animal kingdom, there's very few animals that have sex for pleasure.
Yeah.
And dolphins are one of them.
They sure are, and that lady
They're a bit rapey too.
Yeah, so it's Timesuck with Dan Cummins. So it's I enjoy it, but it's not something that I can binge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I feel like if you could binge a show that was 2 hours of long episodes, you would have no time for anything else.
Well, to be fair, there is one podcast that I can do that with, but they only release episodes like once every 2 months. So,
damn.
Yeah.
What a shame.
I know.
Hardcore history. Call out to you. But yeah, so that's my recommendation this week.
My recommendation this week is a podcast called Witness Borderlands. Now, I can't remember putting this on the list. So what I'm going to do
Classic
is
Nick.
I'm going to read the synopsis. This is, I do remember doing a little bit of research. This is a genuinely true story. So, but I'm going to read what Campsite's put on here. The tall but true tale of a charismatic outlaw, an iconic small-town sheriff, and the record-setting drug bust that ensnared them both. Set in rugged Texas borderlands, Rob D'Amico transports listeners back to the US side of the border for the opening salvo of the war on drugs, where so much dirty money was swirling across the Rio Grande that even the most incorruptible citizens would be tempted. In the tradition of films like No Country for Old Men, that's why, and Charles Portis novels, Witness Borderlands mashes up the shockingly real and deeply surreal, chronicling not just the events of a crime, but digging deep into the mystery and aura of America's most myth-soaked regions. That's
Crime and drugs.
Anyway, crime and drugs. I can't remember.
It's the story of the inciting events of the war on drugs.
Yes. So there was this huge drug bust that happened in the late 70s that involved this sheriff, obviously, and that's as much as I can remember, to be completely honest. I've heard it's really, really good. I reviewed really well.
I'm sorry, you've heard it's really, really good? You haven't listened to it?
I haven't listened to it.
But you put it on this list to recommend it to yourself.
Yes.
To listen to a review next week.
Have you all listened to it though? Anyway, that's why I was like, I can't remember when I put this on here. Also, the podcast art's really good. So yeah, Witness Borderlands.
I'm gonna rip you a new one if it's terrible.
Or if it's shit, then nah, it should be good.
So is it produced by anyone in particular? Is it like a
journalistic? Campsite Media.
Okay.
So I feel like we've recommended them before.
Yep.
Yeah.
I can't remember what, but I remember we looked it up last time too. We're like, what else? They've done something else before. What else have they done before?
Let's move on to Liz.
Yeah. So Liz, yes, your recommendation.
All right. So I'm apologising for recommending another Audible original, being that we don't like Amazon. But I'm going to recommend another Audible original because I really bloody enjoyed this podcast. So it is called...
To be fair, before you recommend it, Audible originals are one of the biggest makers of audio dramas at the moment.
And, you know, when they can afford the cast that they can afford,
why not?
You know, there's been a few that I've gone, this is crap and I hate it. This is not one of them because it is written by John Lutz, who writes for Saturday Night Live, Late Night with Seth Meyers, and 30 Rock, and produced by Broadway Video, who also produced 30 Rock.
Yeah, cool.
And all those shows. It has a cast including Paul Rudd, Jack McBrayer, Paul Lapel, Amber Ruffin, Scott Adsit, Jason Sudeikis, Jane Krakowski, Olivia Wilde, Kenan Thompson, Seth Meyers, Rachel Dratch, Henry Winkler, and a host of other comedy
SNL
favorites.
Yeah,
so
SNL?
everyone who's ever been on SNL and anyone who's friends with them. So here's the story. So it's the year 2038 and there's only one destination that can play host to the world's wealthiest adventure seekers, the Pangalaman Island Resort. It's a virtual reality theme park. So all is like, well, until a really wealthy guy and famous billionaire goes missing within a virtual simulation. And so the people who run the park, who are also a little bit hopeless at shit, have to go in and find the guy and figure out why the program is glitching whilst they're in. So it's like a comedy, adventure, genre switching thing. Jack McBrayer plays Jack McBrayer. I'm into it. He's funny. But yeah, like it's silly and enjoyable. The end.
Okay. How many episodes is it? Is it like ongoing or is it?
No, it's a mini series, so it's done. Let me see how many episodes there are.
This feels like one of those like satires that turns out to be true, when like Mark Zuckerberg gets stuck in the metaverse or some shit, and you're just like,
it's not letting me have a. So the length of it all together, it's not showing me how many episodes, but the length of it all together is 4 hours and 28 minutes.
Okay,
cool.
So I think probably 5 or 6 episodes. Awesome. But yeah, I liked it, and if you didn't.
Well, fair enough.
Yeah,
it's a strong argument from
Liz. Yeah, as always, right? So yeah, that's Escape from Virtual Island.
Cool. Is it? It's only on Audible, right?
It's Audible original. Like some of these Audible originals do end up finding their way onto the major airways, but I think that with some of these mini series, they might not. But
it usually takes like a year.
Yeah,
or more.
Yeah.
That'd be like an exclusivity thing, yeah.
Yes. But honestly, like. Get yourself if you've never had an Audible membership before, you can usually find a code to get you 2 free audio books, and your whole month you can download any of the free stuff and listen to it. So,
and if you're like me, you just keep cancelling it, and they're like, no, don't go. You have a free credit. I'm like, all right.
They do that a lot, and if you've cancelled for 6 months, you're like, do you want this whole month for like $4? And I'm like, well, yeah, sure, I want this month for $4. Thanks.
It's really good. Also, if you've forgotten about it and you've paid for it for a few months, then you go and you chat them and say, I forgot about it. They refund you and still let you keep your credits.
And also,
so it's great.
If you start it up with a few different email addresses and then you have one for 6 months and then they send you an offer to switch to the other one for 6 months and then they send you an offer to switch to the other one for 6 months.
Yeah. I don't know what this podcast has turned into. But
this is advice.
I feel like we should move on to something else.
Ways to give Bezos less money.
Fair.
But Audible's live chat's very good, just FYI. Cool. All right. Let's move on to our recommendations from last week. I want to start with Zane's.
So I recommended a podcast called Strange by Nature. And Strange by Nature is a podcast presented by 3 professional naturalists, Laura, Rachel, and Kirk, about interesting plants and animals and natural phenomena and things. Sort of informal, chatty panel podcast, 30 to 40 minutes. What did you think?
I listened to I listened to this. Let me paint you a picture.
Okay.
I was moving and I listened to this while I was doing my own bond clean.
Oh no.
Don't ever do your own bond clean. That's just
I passed. So
yeah, but you get cranky the whole time you're doing it and you're panicking.
But okay.
Anyway,
we'll talk about that after. Anyway, I listened to this during my bond clean and I found it very therapeutic because I was getting very cranky doing my bond clean. Look, this is like I found this this podcast would be this is Zendry. But
really?
Yes.
Okay.
But the thing that bothered me the most is that there is a little bit of like this awkward chemistry between everyone. And it's very sweet and I didn't mind it, but it stuck with me quite a lot.
Like, and I was like, bonding.
Oh, you guys are
cute.
Good friends talking about like nerd shit. And to be honest, some of the stuff was really, really fascinating. I listened to this, fuck me, it was a while ago, but the stuff they actually talk about, they do talk about with a passion. And that's something that, we were saying in our recommendations. If you're talking about things that you're passionate about and that you like, it comes through and people identify with that. Whether you like the content or not, it's something that you really, really do latch onto. And I really did. Like, these 3 are very, very lovely people. They've got that nerd chemistry that
I definitely understand what you're talking about, like how they're like kind of trying to make jokes at each other's pronunciation or whatever.
Yeah.
Science jokes
doesn't
that
quite
you're not
land.
Because you're
It's like a teacher like making a joke in class to a bunch of kids and then like all the kids are like and the kid's like
if you've done your homework you would understand that.
Yeah. We'll move on. This isn't necessarily a bad podcast. I just think it's not aligned to my interests.
Wow.
And also the chemistry.
You heard it here first. Nick hates
animals.
The environment.
Okay, Jesus Christ, that's a stretch.
No, I get it. Like this is. Maybe I don't understand what Zane Dry means.
I don't believe that this was Zane Dry.
Okay.
So far we've had two episodes where someone said that something is Zane Dry, and as an arbiter, like I am going to make a ruling that I do not believe this is Zane Dry, because they're chatty about it. Right?
Fair.
I feel like Zane Dry has to be someone that talks about a thing without tangents, without trying to make jokes. It's just reciting a World Book encyclopedia, right?
Oh,
it's like hook the knowledge up to my fucking veins. And, you know, like you play it at 1.5 times the speed to get more knowledge in faster. Like, I don't, you know, Zane's just having a moment.
Encyclopedia.
What I do think, and I don't always think this, because sometimes when there's a podcast where there's, you know, nerds discussing nerd things, like, and we nerd out about podcasts, so I'm looping us all into that as well. Occasionally their passion is enough to drive it through to me loving the shit out of it. With this one, I reckon if they had one layperson who wasn't a science person, just one, who occasionally would be like, no, what do you mean? What do you, like, just, and it would make it ever so slightly more approachable. Yeah. Now, I listened to some episodes that were pretty fucking interesting. I really liked them. They were very interesting. But I also was like, I'll come on your podcast and interject when I don't understand something, because there are some things that I'm like, you know, I want to nerd out with them, but some things, you know, just they were talking about them too quickly or glazing over them or anything like that.
It's true. The podcast is nominally for the public, but it is presented by three people. But I like
the concept a lot.
Who know what they're talking about. So,
And so I think sometimes when people are so knowledgeable on a topic, they forget that other people are dumb sometimes. You know, like sometimes I wake up and I choose stupidity for the start of the day, and I'm just going to have a dumb day for the entire day. And it just means that stuff doesn't get into my brain properly, and I need some dumb idiot on a podcast going, what?
It's like me with you two and musicals. You guys
it's like us with you and music. Like
yeah, but I'm one person.
It's like you and me with Zane and history.
True.
It's true.
This is the thing. There's always at least one of us who knows their shit, and two people who are criticizing or you know, like it needs to, and that's only 10%, right? I'd like it 10% more accessible, because if it was, then I'd be like, this is a great thing for kids to listen to, right?
Yeah.
But it's 10% too adulty.
Yeah.
You know? So, but yeah, I enjoyed it. The facts are interesting. I love hearing new facts about weird shit that animals do. And you go,
it's cocktail party fodder.
That's nuts. How is that a thing? But it is a thing, and it's science, and we must love it.
Did you know that staghorn ferns are quite social?
No, I did not.
You did not.
I don't even know.
I listened to something about, what was it, like venomous something? It was like bees venom. That was some kind of venomy waspy thing that was like dissolving a bunch of shit. I don't know. It was fascinating. And then today I listened to another one about a deer mouse. A mouse deer. No, it was a mouse deer. It was a mouse deer. So it was like a deer, but it's only 30 centimeters tall with like little pencil legs. They said it's like they're like the diameter of a pencil. Anyway, so interesting. You know, mouse deer.
What the fuck?
Tiny little mouse deer. See? You didn't know that was a thing.
And now
what
you do.
What the fuck is this?
It's a mouse deer. You were just told.
A chevrotain.
Oh, chevrotain.
I don't know what that is, but...
they did discuss that. They were like, oh, no, it's not from this species. It's from this. And I was like, no.
Okay.
But yeah, like it's good.
Go play chess.
I'm not very good at chess. I do like it though. Anyway, we're going to move on to my recommendation, which was the Judith Nelson Institute for Journalism and Ideas podcast, Journo, a podcast that goes into the depths of what it is to be a journalist and how it is to report the stories around the world, I guess. What do you think, Liz?
If you listen to no other podcast episode this year, I would wholeheartedly recommend listening to the Jonathan Swan episode. It is fantastic. Most people around the world who know anything about American politics will know who Jonathan Swan is, because he, in the middle of an interview, live corrected Donald Trump's facts. And it was just the most beautiful.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because he wasn't even doing it with a polite face. He was like, what the fuck?
Yeah, like I do
and
not.
So many memes of your what the fuck are you saying face were going around. But the story behind how he got that interview and the excellent interview or the terrible interview that he had before it, like just the way he approaches journalism I found fascinating. And yeah, it was a really, really enjoyable episode for me to listen to. I think it's a really good podcast, especially if you are a journalist or were a journalist, as the case is for a lot of journalists. it's a really interesting listen, and it's really interesting to know, especially if you're one of the people who's like, oh, the fucking media. Like, well, do your research then. Not research. It's not a peer review study, but do some listening about how the news is actually put together before you want to call out how shit the media is, because there is a lot of hurdles that journalists have to go through in order to tell particular stories, and it's interesting to know what some of those are before you broad brushstroke that the media are all shit. Some of them are. Not all of them. But yeah, interesting.
Which ones?
I'm not going to put that on air because they'll kill me.
Anyone associated with Murdoch, the end.
Yes.
Look, this is a great podcast, a very important podcast. I just want to get it out there. I really dislike the cover art. I really dislike it.
Do you really?
I do too, because it's really, it's simple. It's too simplistic.
It looks like a board game.
Yeah.
Okay, fair point. I didn't mind it, but now that you frame it as it looks like a board game, it's starting to give me like, okay.
That being said, very important. Like, I think journalism is a underrepresented power in our society, and it's been pushed further and further away from where it should be, which is kind of like this impartial reporter of facts.
You can't be impartial. Like, it's. It makes me so mad, but it's almost impossible to be impartial because of the media ownership laws. Yeah. Like, you have to push an agenda, and the actual journalists who are doing it hate themselves.
Yeah. This did alert my Meta alarm, where I just hate speculation, and it's like going back and examining the political like the political scandals that happened, and like, why did this happen, and why was it reported on this way? And I'm like, we don't know why it happened that way. We just know that it did happen that way. But that's just me. Very good. I've listened to 4 episodes. I probably won't subscribe because for me this is an anger making podcast.
It is pretty full on.
Yeah. Because of course you're talking to journalists who have been involved with the big stories forever. And the big stories forever are pretty angry making. But yeah, absolutely. The Jonathan Swan episode is a very good episode. Learning more about Jonathan Swan is always fun. But yeah, great podcast.
Feels good. Hell yeah. And our final recommendation, Lee.
Radio Rental, a true horror podcast where it's kind of the conceit is found footage in Terry Carnation, aka Rainn Wilson's 80s video store, and then people tell stories of really weird, spooky shit that's happened to them.
Yeah.
What did we think?
I think that this is a very good example of a conceit that is not particularly unique, but enjoyable nonetheless. Like we've had podcasts before where people are telling their own supernatural stories and it's a little bit produced. And I think that this is a very good conceit for a low effort of entry for new podcast listeners.
And also I really like that they market it as true horror, because that is not something that those other creepy tales market themselves as.
No, they don't. So yeah, this is very enjoyable. I'm glad that they started releasing again, because this has been around for a while.
Yeah, so they stopped releasing, I think, because like 2018.
Yeah.
And then everyone was like, "Why only 6 episodes? No." And then they started releasing again and releasing quite regularly. But I don't know which episodes you listen to, but there's a particular story in episode 2 and another one in episode 6 that just. I can't explain them, and they gave me the goosey bumps.
I don't know if it's because I missed the memo for this, because I feel like listening to this. Look, off the bat, I really enjoyed it. I actually really enjoyed it. This is another one of those bond cleaning podcasts that I listen to, and I listen to it with these headphones on, and I've got very expensive headphones, and the storytelling in this is, very claustrophobic. So one of the episodes I listened to was about not a hijacking on a plane, but it was like, what do you even call it? Drama on the plane? It's like a form of violence happens on the plane, and it's actually quite disturbing to listen to. But I found, and I think it's also because I just subscribed and just started listening without even thinking or reading about the show. I went into it and I was like, wait, what the fuck is this weird, like, the show felt so tonally like one and then here, right? So like Terry Carnation comes in and he's just like, here's a story, and then the story is like quite serious, like it's very serious, to be honest. Like the person talks about blood curdling screams, blah blah blah, and then in the middle of it, like Terry Carnation comes, he's like, well, look at that, and I'm just like, oh, okay, yep, shit, all right, that, and it completely shifted for me, and I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah,
and that tonal shift for me, got me very confused. It took me out of it a little bit, but not in a way that I was like, oh, well, this is fucking stupid. I was like, oh, wow, okay, Jesus, right. And I know that is the conceit, right? That is like the VHS. The
and if you listen to it from the first episode, it kind of...
Yeah, because I went straight in. I think I just picked a random fucking episode. Yeah. And again, the genuine stories behind it and how it's presented in that sort of old school format is really cool. But for me, when I went into it like stone cold, I was like, whoa, what the fuck is this? Like,
there's like a full story arc that he has if you listen all the way through about his cat Malachi, and they're like dying, and then suddenly Malachi's back, and it's like a full, like if you listen to all of the bits, like you're just like...
because I wasn't sure, because I was just like, well, I'm just going to pick a random episode, right? Because for some reason I thought that would be the smart thing to do rather than listen to the first episode, get an idea for it.
I mean, honestly, you make decisions.
Yeah. Like recommending podcasts that you've not listened to.
I've done it before. You just don't know which ones. But this is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think you make a really good point. There are some stories that you can't really explain. You have to listen to it, because how they're told by whether it's actors or not, I think the plain one feels very much not an actor. This is a person.
I think it feels like it is told by the actual people, right?
I think that they are told by the actual people with a coach there.
With a producer,
getting them to tell us.
Which I think is actually, that's great. Like, honestly, because it does pull you in. And the way that the stories are told are really good. But I was just so confused about like the whoop-de-doo energy that sort of comes back in. I'm like, oh, shit, all right, cool, yep, and then readjust and then go back in. But I did really, really enjoy it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Also, your podcast art's different to mine for Radio Rental.
Yeah, they switch it up every now and then. So
I'm cool with that.
If it's like they had a different one for their Halloween episode, and then they have this one sitting up the top. Yep, yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, but there was a. I just need to get this out. There's a story in episode 2 about someone who, like, his girlfriend comes in and wrecks the place and blah blah blah, and then leaves, and then his girlfriend, like, there were two. It's on a fucking videotape, and she wasn't there, but she was there, and I'm so confused, and I still don't like. Anyway, you have to listen to it.
I haven't listened to that one, so I can't weigh in.
What episode was it?
It's 2. Pretty sure it's in 2. Okay. Where I was just like, how? I
thought you said cow.
No. It's like one of those. It's one of those, like, some kind of like glitch in the Matrix versus like we're all in a simulation versus, like, you know, string theory, and this is just a multiversal,
infinite multiverse.
Yeah, and it's just a different version of the. Oh my god, I can't explain it. Some of them I'm like, oh, that makes sense, but like that one cannot explain.
You clearly have schizophrenia.
Yeah. If it wasn't on video, it was on video.
I laugh because that's my greatest fear.
Schizophrenia.
Oh, there's a ghost over there. No, I'm just crazy.
I'm just crazy. Cool.
That was scary. Anyway, cool. That does us. Oh my god, that went by very quickly.
That's
cool.
it for another week.
How bloody good. I do want to back announce our podcast list. We'll start with you.
Escape from Virtual Island, Audible original podcast.
Zane.
Timesuck with Dan Cummins. It's 2.5 hours long, that name. But it's real long.
And mine is Witnessed Borderlands. That's about it.
It's probably good.
It's probably good.
Shoot, I've heard it's good.
Great ratings and discussion from the community about said podcast. Yep. And Liz is upset with me by it. So I'm looking forward to. I really hope you like it.
You have to have at least listened to half of one episode before you recommend something.
Well, at least half of one.
Yeah, that's my rule.
Oh, okay. No, I've listened to the trailer.
I mean, well, that's
I don't really remember
it,
but I don't remember listening to the trailer. Anyway. Oh, dear. Well, that does us for this week of recommending podcasts. If you want to recommend us some podcasts, and please do so, because there's been some in the list, and I actually started listening to a few that came through. I think that you might have recommended a few weeks ago.
On a mini-sode.
Yes, that's right, actually, yes. So please do, through a great little form, that's not canon.com/castology. Go and do that. Zane will deal with it, and I might hear
Tell
about
us
it.
what to listen to.
I will listen to it. I won't guarantee it'll make it onto the podcast.
I love throwing you under the bus for that.
The great majority of podcasts that have been sent through in the last while, I have greenlit if anyone wants to.
All right, I'm jumping in.
I'm looking at them right now. There is quite a few, so I'm looking forward to adding to my list after listening to them, of course.
Yes, half of one. Half of one. It's the only rule.
And you can also leave reviews and star ratings as well. We did find out that you can do this on Spotify. You can leave a star rating on Spotify. So if you are listening to us via Spotify,
you do have to listen to it.
You do have to listen to the show.
Give it a random one, but you're hearing this at the end of an episode, so you should have listened to it.
So if you have listened to this and you enjoyed it, please go and give us a star rating on any of your preferred platforms. We do love to see it, and we'll finally be able to see it on Spotify. So that's great.
How exciting!
Yeah. That's bloody fucking good. I'm excited. Bloody fucking good.
Yep.
Bloody fucking good.
Real Australian just there.
It's going to be very confusing for our foreign listeners. Anyway, that'll do us for this week of listening to podcasts. I've been one of your hosts, Nick Bleak. Across from me has been
Zane C. Weber.
And
Elizabeth H. Best.
Keep enjoying your podcast, people.
When you walk through an art museum, what happens?
You see some interesting things, you see some not so interesting things, and if you're like me at all, you're probably a little bit sleepy.
Well, grab a cafecito and listen up. It's Art Slice, a palatable serving of art history.
I'm Russell Shoemaker.
I'm Stephanie Dueñas. We are not your daddy's art history podcast. We are both artists, so we look at art history through that perspective. We cover the artists you know and those that have been ignored for so many different reasons.
We look at the context of the time, we compare it to today.
We don't dumb anything down, but, and this is a big but,
Hey-o.
we like to have a good time, okay? Nos gusta to goof around, all right? We have hungry pantry bonds that might startle you. It's a long story.
We feed them art materials. Art is just a visual language, so in order for us to interpret what we think it's saying, we hijack the work.
Right. How do you like that for an art heist?
Exactly. And ultimately, we decide if it belongs in our Art Slice Museum on top of the Art Slice Hilltop.
So if this all sounds good to you, join us on Art Slice, a palatable serving of art history.